Welcome to House Rule, a podcast about role-playing. You are listening to episode number 26, and we have a giant, huge, full panel of discussion for this episode. We have a bunch of people. I'm one of your hosts, Ed, and we also have...
Ebo.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Lee.
I'm Richard.
I'm Murray.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was surprised you didn't use the word veiny to describe this panel. I thought you were going all out.
Well,
I was just going to say I'm a dick, but I was like, no.
You kind of are.
I could have gone with, like, throbbing or
Pulsating.
Engorged.
Mm-hmm.
It's an engorged group of discussion panel members tonight.
More of a crucible.
That's some imagery right there.
I don't even know what that means. It's a crucible because we are talking about one of the most poignant subjects in all of the role-playing game world, which is the illustrious and storied Amber diceless role-playing game as our subject for today.
I was going to say, it sounds, it's kind of infamous, really,
Yeah.
on the internets. It's, at the same time, the subject of a lot of verbal abuse and fond memories for people.
Well,
Broken friendships.
on the House Rule blog, Jeff recently posted a thing that likened different role-playing games to different high school cliques or archetypes, and I was gonna say, like, Amber is kind of like a really, really cool dad of your friend who it's like, it would be cool if I could hang out with him, but he's too old. It seems a lot older
What,
than
you
it
guys
is. I
don't do
think.
that? You don't hang out with your dad's friends?
Well, my friend's dads know.
Hanging with
It's
your
not-
dad's friends puts it knee-deep into weird territory almost immediately.
It's not really as old as I'm making it seem. It just looks old to me because it's been around for as long as I've been role-playing or longer and hasn't been reprinted since then.
It's like early 90s, right?
96, I think, is when it was.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that was the source book. I can't recall.
But the books themselves it's based off are or older than that.
Oh, yeah. I
The
mean, they're
books
pretty...
themselves they spanned almost 20 years, didn't they?
I don't remember.
I thought they started in like the late 70s and went into the early 90s.
I would have a hard time believing that none of them were written in the 70s.
The one I have, the fourth printing is 99.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure there's at least a version that was printed in earlier than that, as early as 96, but I don't know if that was when it first came out.
It first came out in 1991. That was its publication date.
Playing game?
So
And the first Amber novel came out in 1970, and the last one came out in 91.
There we go. So it's
Bam, internet.
so
You're
it's
welcome.
got some
Really
pedigree. It's
It does have some pedigree.
one of those games where, like, we tried. Well, I should say that Rory, our current GM, tried a couple of times to start it earlier in all of our gaming careers, and fell flat. I think largely because not everybody was familiar with the source material, and in my opinion, that is really a big deal in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there was just a level of maturity that was needed
Sure.
that was not necessarily present in our teen years.
I would agree.
Well, okay.
I don't know. I mean, I thought that the guys ride the Shadow where people rode around in monster trucks and shot dinosaurs with giant staple guns was really mature.
Well, how many dogs did Rory kill in this one?
Probably a lot.
None, but he killed my boat and burned my house down.
In Shadow, you can
Okay, I'd say
build as
that's
many
a
houses
that's
you
a step up on maturity level.
Our
His
horses
boat
died.
wasn't alive.
My boat was stolen, and I would say that probably destroyed,
He
so it
killed
was
our
almost
horses.
assuredly killed.
Oh, the horses died?
Yeah.
Several times.
I think
Alright, well-
that the loss of pets is not quite such a critical thing in this game,
Yeah.
where I think that I've heard people describe the diceless role-playing game system put forth in the Amber game as like the ideal system for a lot of different things, and I can tell that those people are mainly just saying that they dislike dice. Because I can't imagine another game working quite as well as a game set in the Amber universe with the system, just because it's at the same time it's like a wish fulfillment universe and just like a masochistic universe where anything bad can happen to you in the entire world. Also, you can just go and find whatever you want.
I want to take
So
a
now-
quick step back here and just a brief overview of what this is. Series of Amber novels, there's 10 of them. The role-playing game is based on that and in that setting, and the idea is that y'all make characters who are sort of an extension from those book series, and you play out in this sort of, I don't know, family feuding setting that's based around having like a multiverse and stuff like that.
Now,
It's one of
because
the
I-
early. It's one of the early settings based off of traveling across multiverse infinite settings of your imagination.
Because
Yeah.
I have no familiarity with diceless role-playing at all, what is the mechanic? Is it entirely bargaining?
Okay,
It is up
So-
to the GM.
there are 4 stats. They sometimes matter. The 4 stats are Psyche, Strength, Endurance, and Warfare. And between them, they cover pretty much any contest that you'd get involved in. There are 2 different steps to a contest. The first step is, are you competing with somebody else in the family? If you are, then you compare your rank in the stat.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever has the higher rank tends to win. Tactics and description and planning takes a huge role of that, a huge part of that as well. The second step is, if you're fighting against somebody or competing against someone who's not in the family, then you compare your number to their number. And again, higher number tends to win, with tactics and scenarios and stuff like that taking a large effect. The caveat is stuff. All characters have good, bad, or 0 stuff, which is kind of like their view on life and how lucky they are both at the same time. So if you have bad
Mechanically-
stuff, you tend to do worse at everything and tend to be more jaded and depressed.
So do they like basically try to negotiate against each other with the GM involved as a mediator, and then the GM says, "Yeah, you know, these things kind of make sense, and that's what's going to happen," or like after statistics are involved, if you take all the planning into account, if something just happens to make a lot of sense that would work based on the amount of planning that was put into it, that's when the exceptions happen.
That sounds reasonably accurate. How I like to think of it is in D&D, if you ever GM'd a D&D game for like a new player or someone doesn't know how it works, the first thing they're going to do is like access their real life knowledge or something else, and they're going to describe in details, well, I'm just going to do this, 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 and this, but it's like it's an abstract system, you still have to roll. And it's like, okay, maybe if you're nice, you'll give them a +2 or something. Whereas Amber, that is the whole game.
Well, or if you're a dick, you can say, well, you have an intelligence of 6, so I don't know how you would have been able to do that.
It's like
Right,
in
and
Amber,
I was-
that sort of stuff is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah.
going to say that good and bad stuff mechanically is essentially if you have a debt or a surplus of points, either at character creation or later, if you keep points in reserve that you aren't spending on powers or attributes, those become good stuff. If
No.
you well,
You have to tell me that you're putting it into good stuff.
I understand, but what I'm saying is
You can do that?
Yes.
at character creation, at least, it's presumed that if you're not spending any of
Right.
your points, you are going to spend them on good stuff. However, if you go into debt at character creation, or if you decide that a particular acquisition is worth debt temporarily, you then acquire bad stuff.
So is this game where Give Me the Good Stuff came from? Is that like...
No.
I don't
No.
think so, but
No way. But,
So when we talk about going into debt, you have a number of points that you have at character creation that you spend between your 4 stats and a number of powers. How you generate your stats is fairly unique.
I'd say so.
You
That's
actually
true.
run it by an auction. So I will say, if I was running, I'd say, okay, we're going to do the strength auction. I'd give a little thing about what strength does for you, and then everybody does a blind bid. And
Okay.
then I say what the highest is, and everybody goes from there. Once you've bid points in something, you can never take them back, and you have bid that many points. That determines both how many points you have in it and your rankings. So if a starting bid for strength, someone bid 30, and you didn't want to bid more than 30, you would be stuck at your starting bid. You have to go higher.
I really thought that there was a span where I thought that the being stuck with the amount of points you bid was kind of punitive in terms of the way an auction should be run, but really there's too much incentive to manipulate somebody by bidding them up, and then taking all your points back when they have spent a ton of theirs. So it's basically like, this is how you know that you're bidding with real money, is not by you eventually have to spend it if you win, but it's like you have to put yourself up there. Everybody knows if you're bidding high on Warfare that your character is one who has historically put himself out there as either aspiring to be the best fighter or being the best fighter. So it adds a little bit of role play to the background when you see what everybody's bidding at character creation. You can basically see like, oh, this character is obviously going to be strong in any contest related to strength because we auctioned together, which implies that our characters know about each other's upbringing. And
now, at the time, was it a secret auction?
No.
The first bid is blind, so you don't know if somebody's going to try to bid super high. And the sticky thing there is if everybody bids low to medium with the blind bid, then you climb up from there. If one person really wants to lock it down, they can bid a high bid, and then everybody who does not want to match or exceed them is stuck with what they started with, even if it's 0.
Yeah.
So in the game that we're currently doing, that's what happened with strength. Someone bid much higher than other people wanted to on strength, so everybody else was stuck with low scores in strength.
I think I have 2.
On the other hand, both Psyche and Warfare got a little bit out of control with bidding up quickly, so that we have Psyche and Warfare in the 50 to 70s range for the two highest people in both.
You start with 100 for what
and you have 100 points total.
You have 100 points total, and it is important to note that whether or not you're familiar with the Amber universe, the most important powers that involve traveling to different universes are basically in the 50-point range for the cheap ones. So it's like if you want to take that, you need to save about half of your points without bidding them, and oh boy, I sure didn't do that.
Also, just to give our listeners a bit of an advantage, the GM is not your friend in this. They are going to try to get you to spend all your points. They're going to tell you that each stat is the best stat when you get to it.
And make sure you remember how important all the powers are to you.
Their job is to screw everyone over.
The GM's job in the auction is try to get everyone to spend as many points as possible.
That's because
at the same time, the book says that the GM should not let anyone spend more than 5 points worth for bad stuff over.
It suggests that you should try to have that avoided unless they have a plan.
Because anything beyond that the person is almost unfunctional. Because bad stuff is really
You can make a lot of different types of characters work. But yeah, basically, you don't want to go too overboard. And that's the problem. The emotional charge of the attribute auction is the very essence of the instinct to go overboard. You want it. You want to win so bad.
I actually went into that auction with a really medium baseline
and
for what I wanted.
Your stats look great. I can't argue with the numbers aren't super high, but it's a perfectly solid spread of attributes. Whereas mine are a little weak in a lot of places.
The other interesting thing about the attribute spread in Amber is once you get your starting attributes, both you and the other players don't necessarily know what they are after that point. Because when you spend experience in them, well, you don't know how much experience points you have. When you spend experience, the GM takes care of the factoring how much goes where. You just tell them how you want to spend it roughly. And so you don't know what rank you are after the initial bidding, basically, and no one else knows where you are either.
Yeah, you can keep track of your powers and abilities and possessions, but you don't really have a character sheet, so to speak. The GM is keeping track of stat ratings and rankings without you getting to know them. So if you ever want to if you say you want to put points in strength, the only way to find out if your ranking has gone up is to try to wrestle somebody who you think you might now be stronger than.
Yeah,
you really don't have a better option than to just pit yourself against other people to learn those things.
Something that was awkward for me starting out in it is that the lack of knowledge makes it seem like it's more of an abstract kind of game, but it is not. You just don't know. The numbers are there, and the numbers are basically the backbone of everything. You just don't know what they are.
Oh, something dawned on me too. I think when you guys were talking about this like a while back, I think Rory had mentioned something about how there's like a lot of bonuses that are given out in the background that nobody knows about too. So, I mean, is that true? Am I even remembering this correctly? As far as like,
So one of the ways you get bonus points for character creation is you agree to do certain contributions, such as writing a detailed backstory, agreeing to make journal entries, making trumps, which are like portraits of different characters in the game, stuff like that. And you get bonus points for doing that. Additionally, this is not by the book, but I think it makes sense. If people write really awesome things with their backstory, I incorporate that into the game, and sometimes those don't cost extra points if they make sense for the background.
no, what about like, what about throughout the game though? Like, as far as advancement's concerned later on.
So you can advance most of the time just by spending your experience after or between sessions, but some things you have to have training or get in-game. So like if you find a really cool sword, and you actually want to keep that sword, you have to spend your character points on it. If you're just going to use it for a session and then kind of it'll be lost, you don't need to spend points on it. If you want to learn a new power, you usually need to find someone to teach you at least the basic part of that power before you can actually gain it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting system. I find myself always wanting to know how good I am at something, and Rory's always just like, you don't know.
There are a couple of things like that I desire to know, but I think that I kind of get a bit of a charge out of the not knowing thing. I think if I was being a little bit more ambitious about increasing my attributes, it would be more of a pickle that I'm in. Whereas as it stands, my character has taken the plunge and started to try to acquire powers that are not explicitly described in any of the game materials or literature, stuff that's just unique to this game. And so it's like, I don't know what kind of powers I really am able to do and what I will be able to learn. And that's pretty cool, just because it takes the pressure off of me to, well, not that there's generally pressure, but it takes the potential out of my hands to like read the book and master everything, so that I know exactly when I'm going to be getting which pieces of which powers. I'm just kind of in it to play the game and experience what happens.
And in the end, you kind of prioritize what you want. Like, it's sort of like if you're trying to be competitive and like kill all the other players, for example, you're going to want to think that through pretty well. If you're trying to like do the things you want to do, then it's like if you fall behind in something, it doesn't really matter as long as you spent your points the way you want to spend them. But
Yeah, and something that I think is interesting is regarding the way that I wanted to say this just before I forgot it, is like regarding, about the conflict between players or between characters and that sort of thing, is that even in the books, like you can see, like after reading through them again after playing Amber, like you could tell that the characters who are interested in murdering other people or in being in direct conflict with other people frequently take jabs at them in subtle ways to test their prowess against them. Like you can see the way the characters do that, and it's like if I was really gunning for people, I just know that I'd be prodding people all the time, trying to figure it out.
It's weird, but it actually almost strikes me, and maybe I'm just reading this wrong, but it kind of strikes me as, in a way that a lot like real life, because when you're playing and you know what your stats are, you can size up a lot of things. But, like when you're walking down the street, if somebody has like a verbal confrontation with you, you really have to consider if you want to take it to the next level or not, because you don't actually have a piece of paper that says, well, I am this strong, so...
I have 18, your average thug only has
Yeah.
12.
Well,
And,
you're
it-
just-
and it's even more true amongst the players because they don't know how strong they are, and they don't know how strong you are, so it's like, well, there's only one way to find out. If we really, it must be really important for it to get to that point. You know what I mean?
One thing, and I'm not trying to like ruin anything about the game, but any player conflict that's gone on so far has been extremely subtle. And it's we've played quite a few sessions, and that just strikes me as something that I didn't think would happen. I thought there was going to be a lot more people at each other's throats, and like trying like murder attempts and stuff like that.
I have to admit that I am a little bit disappointed by the amount of player conflict that has occurred at this point. I would really enjoy it if some of the characters were at each other more, but it's been a very cooperative, group-oriented game, which is fairly unique.
To use an Amber in joke, I think that we're a lot more of a Merlin game than a Corwin game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I sort of feel like I was gonna say I feel like I haven't been given the proper motivation to like really go after anybody else.
Yeah, I was
At the
gonna
same
ask
time,
about that.
I feel like I probably should have if I had really wanted that, I would have probably put it in my background. Something contentious.
Go ahead.
Is there like a goal for like to win the game? Because that's the only thing I can think of that somebody would really
Become
want.
king.
Yeah.
That's
It
a
depends on
pretty.
what your character considers winning.
There was one real point in all of reality, and that is Amber itself. Everything else is just shadows or reflections of that location.
Well,
It's
I'm
kind
just
of
saying.
the mentality. So the goal or winning condition would be to become king of Amber.
Well, like anybody listening to this, if they've never done anything like that, they're probably used to almost always working together with their team. So,
Right.
what would be the real reason to even turn against a bunch of people that you know that are friends that you like playing games with? That sounds like a mess waiting to happen.
Well,
I think part of it is
I
that our
agree and I
characters seem to
disagree.
be kind of selfish on things. Is like no one has made any really obvious, like plays for things that other people consider valuable that I'm aware of. Like I can see the group falling apart if people become contentious about the things that they want. Like oh well, my character has been really valuing this, and now somebody else wants to take it or destroy it or something. And like Ed's character, he recently basically placed himself in a situation that may put him at odds with the goals of a lot of the other characters. And
Yeah,
and it's
in
like,
character, my character is really optimistic that everything is going to turn out okay. Out of character, I am almost positive that this is going to slap me in the face.
it's like Jeff's character, at least to me, seems to value the safety of Amber because it affects the safety of his people. My character is just loyal to Amber. Evo's character is loyal to Amber. Ed's character is, I don't know, I guess loyal to Amber in a tree now.
I said I just told the King Regent that I was 100% devoted to Amber.
And that was
Yes,
less
you
than
did lie to his
half an
face.
hour.
Ah.
Less than half an hour after you told us that you weren't sure.
I'm not I don't have any reason to believe that I mathematically don't have 100% loyalty to spare. Because, well, I disagree about the contention that we're at war. It's fine. Everybody's okay. Nobody has tried to kill me because of my lie yet. So we're fine.
If you've read the Amber books, the concept of a throne war is going to loom over pretty much any Amber game. And that is sort of like a generic default, I think, that's in the author's mind for kind of how things go. Some things that might sort of make that seem odd is that everyone is basically starting level characters, and if you run a game where you bring the whole group of people together, you're all going to want to play kind of at the same time, and that's really well suited for like more of a group cooperative sort of thing. But also, you've got these characters from the books that everyone knows are super powerful, and it's like in the current game, there was a vacuum at one point, and like a power vacuum, and still no one went for it because one of the reasons you can think of is because like well, yeah, there's still, big daddy, big uncle sitting out there who could just come in and wipe the floor with you. Like,
And fortunately, I think that in a stroke that has so far seemed masterful and entertaining to the maximum amount, most of the elder Amber characters, the ones who have legendary properties, and even if you don't look at the statistics, they're people who are considered to be the strongest and the best fighting. Most of those people are out of the picture for one reason or another.
yeah.
And we have no reason to believe that it's permanent, but we also have no reason to believe that our shenanigans can be stopped by the intervention of Benedict trumping in and cutting all of our heads off.
I'm pretty sure that as a group, we just went out of our way to prove that as like the team of us is difficult to stop, because I'm pretty sure the guy we just more or less executed, chopped up into a bunch of bits, put in a concrete block and sealed that inside of a lead block, and then put it in a place where no one can ever get it. I'm pretty sure that guy was like significantly more powerful than any of us individually. I don't know about compared to the Elder Amberites.
You guys just defeated the first major antagonist of the game. He was introduced in the second session.
Yes.
And he's been around for a while now. You really, really defeated him quite soundly.
we went out of our way to make that defeat as permanent as we thought we could make it.
Yeah. I was not at all sure that I was going to get out of that alive at all.
I am almost 100% sure that I survived that every potentially lethal encounter in that session because I have a surplus of good stuff.
Are you guys allowed to talk about what kind of roles you think your character plays in the story?
I think Rory just froze up.
Huh?
I'm not
No.
I think my videos are
The
going
videos
weird.
are a little laggy, but
Or
it's
or
not
does
as-
that give away too much about the game that you want to keep secret?
it's not as much about what people are allowed to talk about as what they're willing to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean,
If
I'm
anybody's
more than
willing to
happy for
talk
people
about
to tell me what they want to tell me about their character. It's just what they want to share with everybody else.
The basic idea I had for my character was like a really good magic type character, and I lost the auction for Psyche to Jeff, so I'm not the most mentally powerful, and I lost every other auction by a mile because I don't think I bid in 2 of them, and so I'm like 4th or 5th place tied 4th in like 2, which is the last place in those. So I want to be really magically powerful. I've sort of been kind of struggling with the fact that I didn't build a lot of consistency into my character's background. He's got fewer roots and thus fewer character elements out there in shadow, but Rory has introduced an additional axis of reality that is apparently in competition, or at least could arguably be in competition with Amber, which is based on Norse mythology and the idea that the entire universe is suspended on a giant tree. And my character has kind of dipped his toes into that world, and it's seeming like it might become a bigger part of his gameplay going forward, his divided loyalties.
He's found something that might be his niche to get
Well,
back in the game.
I still have a lot of... I'm not saying that I wasn't in the game before, I'm just saying that he was sort of the... I wouldn't say he was blundering from place to place, but
I wasn't assuming that.
He wasn't like the master of any domain.
But
Now
by
he's
your
got this-
standards.
I'm just saying now I have this basically an entire universe that I can visit that nobody else can, which
Okay.
gives
I'm pretty
me an
sure that
edge.
I'm the master of the blundering domain. I blunder professionally.
You get stabbed in the chest a lot of times.
Well, if we're looking at what's happened in most sessions, Ed has been poisoned.
Oh boy, I got poisoned real bad.
Wouldn't
Lee
be a
has
Rory
been-
game without someone getting poisoned.
Right,
Stabbed
you're
or
free now.
incapacitated regularly.
That happened twice in the last session. My character lost a pinky.
Oh
It's
no.
growing back though. No big
And a
deal.
kneecap. I bet your
And Jeff
cap
has
will be back.
extended sessions of talking to people who he's not letting anybody else know about who he's talking to.
What?
That is true.
No.
So, okay, let me ask this,
And
Jeff.
Evo has been the silent protector for us all.
Yep, and Joe has randomly shown up with crazy news that no one understands or
Evo is
thinks he
a-
understands either.
Oh my
Evo
God,
is essentially a ninja.
is Joe like
Evo
a town
is-
crier that nobody listens to or something?
Joe
co-character's
is
fucked
a
up, man.
Joe's what?
Joel's character's really fucked up.
Yeah, he's got some stuff.
Joe's
I really
character
like the
is
stuff that Joe
mentally
comes up with.
unstable,
Yeah, I do
and
too.
I'm pretty sure that he's working for
Was-
He's like the wild card.
Joe's character was in one of the sessions I missed, right?
Yes.
Okay. 'cause
Actually, it might be fun for you guys to tell me what you think is going on with Joe's character. That's
last-
part of the fun of this kind of an Amber game, is
doesn't.
figuring out what people think is
The
going
last
on.
thing that I remember happening with him was this was a lot of sessions ago. The last thing of major significance that happened with him was that Rowan, who turned into an antagonist, who seems to have mind reading powers, accused him of committing mass murder and being the worst villain. However, Rowan turned out to be something of a heel, so there's no telling if that was just sensationalism. However, the fact that Joe's character did not contest him on that suggests to me that he probably wasn't completely off the mark.
I'm pretty sure that my character has a fairly good idea about what's going on with Joe. I don't know if I specifically shared it with people, but in one section I took Joe with me to a Dreamland, and I saw countless versions of Joe that had all been bloodied and or murdered in one gruesome way or another, extending back from him infinitely.
That's fascinating.
And he seems to believe that whenever that he participates in fights and dies and then is reborn, or it happened a bunch of times. I have no idea whether or not to believe this is the most recent incarnation, or that we're talking to an incarnation that has died since we originally met him.
And this is the sort of game where you can have stuff like that. Like, you can have shadows of characters, and you can have basically infinite possibilities of all kinds of things that could be going on.
Well, it sounds
so
like
it's
the
kind of a-
mystery and the intrigue is really where it's at for this whole thing.
Yeah, I think all of our characters have a fair amount of stuff that the other characters are in the dark about, or at least may or may not be in the dark about,
We all
or the
have at
characters
least
are and the
something.
players aren't necessarily.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention about the advancement is the stat comparison is pretty brutal. So, like, if you wanted to go up against someone, you're going to want a higher stat than them. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have had a lot of people, like, going down different routes and different powers and stuff. Because if we were at each other's throats, we would all want stats. We would all want to get ahead. We would all want that. But it's
Sure,
like we're doing a lot of, I want to accomplish this. I need a power to do that, not a stat.
Right, and I think that the issue too is that we have an idea where everybody's stats lie roughly from the attribute auction, so it kind of comes down to we if we were to try to clash, we would all probably want to pick a slightly different contest, and so the basic idea is you do not want under any circumstances to get caught playing somebody else's game by their rules. You don't want for Hector, the extremely competent fighter, to get caught in some sort of mental duel with Isaac, the extremely brainy, whatever, Matrix man. And it's just that basically, yeah, you would need to start working on your stats to at least get them. If you wanted to be conflicting, you'd need to at least try to get into a space where you're not going to be easily steamrolled by one trick that they have.
Ed, do you
Yes.
think that now, after there may have been some advancement, that you could take Jeff?
No,
Nope, not possible.
because
It's actually not possible.
because I know what the things that I've been advancing in, and well, I mean, strictly speaking, I might have a move that would win the day, but I
Yeah.
would not plan on taking him because those moves don't seem reliable.
Well, see, because like obviously Jeff, you know that Jeff won out on that on the ability that you wanted.
Mhm.
So, I mean, only if he kept pushing it would he be able to
You
definitely stay
cannot
ahead.
pass
You can't physically
the
bypass
top rank.
If you
Right.
think about it, also less like in a strict like mental duel where none of us are really describing much. Sure, a stat is going to decide that, but then he has powers where, like, if he could trick me into going to a place where he has power and I don't, which is a situation that exists, then
And-
yeah, he'd win out.
Like, and that's the thing is, I know no matter how much I try to advance my psyche, I will still be second rank unless I don't know if this is implicit in the rules, but I've always assumed that. Well, I mean, I guess if I killed Jeff, I'd become first rank. That would probably be pretty.
I guess I didn't realize that once somebody takes a rank, that is in place.
We should
And
talk
it's
about
like,
that. That's an interesting topic.
As far as okay, Rory can explain this better than me.
By the book, the top rank is the top rank is the top rank. They can never advance that score, and no one can ever pass them in that score.
Mm-hmm.
That is the odd thing in the game. So if you put 70 points in Warfare, you have 70 points in Warfare, you will never need to raise it up again, and no one will ever, if you have first rank, and no one will ever be able to exceed that point total. That makes it really hard to compete with the Elder Amberites, however, because many of them have much higher stats than that.
Like hundreds?
Some of them have stats in the hundreds.
Yeah, goofy stats.
Well, I
Funny
mean,
joke stats.
usually in the ones that they are good at.
Right.
So I guess.
You could guess Fiona probably has a psyche over 100.
So does that mean that you're kind of hoping that there are people that are going to be high in every stat, so that you can eventually raise whatever stat you want up to a certain point, because at least there is somebody that has a high stat in that?
There's also been a lot of talk in forums. This game has been modified a lot, and there's some easy ways to make it so the highest person can raise their stat, and ultimately where people can go above the highest ranked person at an additional cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I have said that I will probably be willing to use both of those rules. I'm not going to say if anybody has taken advantage of either of those yet.
Very good.
The implicit challenge in the by the book rules is that if you want to defeat someone who's higher in whichever stat, the example in place is Psyche. Basically, any contest where we're just pushing our minds against each other, and whoever collapses the first is going to fold and ultimately die. We're going to say the situation will maybe result in them dying. It will basically be probably cut and dry. Whoever's got the highest will eventually prevail. Mm-hmm. If it's such a thing where you're not just like trying to thrust minds at each other to kill, if it's one of those things where you're just trying to find weaknesses or probe strengths, maybe endurance will come into play if the contest carries on long enough. And otherwise, you essentially have to find some way to either win the day through some sort of strategy or plan or other environmental effect that you have tried to bring to bear, or else change the nature of the contest, such as like weaseling out of a mental contest long enough to thrust a dagger if you're better at warfare than the other person.
Right.
And if you can make the contest basically a twofold contest of things where you are just close enough to being as good as them in one and substantially better in the other, then maybe you'll be able to topple.
So hence all of the probing around subtly, people trying to figure out who's weak at what.
The more classic example is two characters who are very close in warfare. If one of them is confident that they're higher in strength, they might try to grab the other one and squeeze the life out of them.
So the example from the books that is fairly classic is the fight between Corwin and Gerard.
Yeah, I was going to say the Corwin and...
The Corwin and Gerard is a classic example of a switching the stat being used in the middle of a conflict. Because Corwin goes into the fight using his sword, clearly using warfare, clearly dominating the fight. And Gerard takes a couple of substantial hits, gets him close, and switches the conflict to strength. And just dominates at that point.
Squeezes him.
And there's nothing Corwin can do once it gets to the point. Once it gets to that point, he can't switch the conflict again in time.
And the other
Eric does a similar thing when he pulls up the chair and starts fighting defensively.
The other example of the other thing that I described was a fight in the book where Corwin is confronted by Benedict with murderous intent, and Benedict is, of the characters described in the books, and I think in the role-playing game stats, but I haven't really read them in any detail, is like the most better than everybody at anything. He's like the ultimate fighter. Everybody understands that if Benedict draws his sword to try to kill you, then the responsible thing to do is die. But the idea is that there's, in the environment, there's this black road which has caused this unsettling effect of grabbing people who step on it with the foliage in the area. Benedict doesn't know about it, and Corwin does. Benedict has no reason to believe he would be in peril if he steps on it, and so Corwin manages to trick him into getting on it long enough for him to avoid being stabbed to death.
And give him time to run away, basically.
Yes, and give him time to run away.
That's one of the things that I find charming about this game, is that I feel like I'm running away so much more. Running away, I would consider surrendering in this game, where in a lot of role-playing games it seems like the ultimate faux pas.
Wow, I don't feel like I'm running away as so much as being carried away.
So one of the interesting things about the Elder Ambrites, or the NPCs in this game, is in the book they present at least 3 copies of each one with different stats and different breakdowns, different points. So every kid, so the GM can say, I like this version a little bit more. I like this version a little bit more. I like a combination of these two together. So you don't, even having read the books, you don't necessarily know exactly what the other NPCs are going to have.
And
yeah, you know, in general, what they're theoretically good at. Like, I know, like my character, his mentor is Fiona, the wizardess and at-large sort of maniacal, crazy person. But she, knowing what I know in the book, I can be like, oh, well, I know she's an accomplished sorceress, and she's super smart, and she's really secretive. But, like it came up in the last session where Roy, I was like, she probably has conjuration. Roy's like, you think she probably does? And I'm like, that's probably accurate.
And even setting aside the stats that they list in the books, they also characterize the characters differently for different stat builds. And you could use any of those ideas, like what if Cain was a traitor? What if Fiona was possessed? That sort of thing. And so it's like, I like the idea that you can kind of construct the existing world to your liking based on the truths that you decide to accept into it, instead of just taking like what the literature most strongly suggests, because there are plenty of holes to fit in whatever you want to play in that world.
Flora is a really good example of that. In the book, she doesn't really come off as that powerful or important a lot of the time. And the 3 different builds for her are very different and express very different aspects of her character and what she's like. So there's Flora, faithful servant of the crown, whereas basically how she's presented in the first book, as just a kind of a lackey to Eric. And there's Flora, proprietor of Shadow Earth, which is kind of how she's presented in the Merlin cycle, where she's kind of in charge of protecting Earth, and that's her personal shadow. She actually has Earth as a shadow expenditure in that one. And then there's the final version, which is Flora, Power and Waiting, which has her fairly significantly more powerful and been biding her time and playing this game of pretending to be helpless, staying in the background, and actually has something major in the works.
That's one thing that's really cool. If you've read the book, there is an intense amount of room for interpretation for all of the existing characters. So it's like no 2 Amber games would be alike, even though they have a cast of characters that are similar.
In great, yeah, I think well, Zelazny was involved with the creation of the first role-playing book, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It's like the alternative interpretations. I feel like that was his hand at work, and he's like, well, what if they were like this instead? How would you feel about that? And then the people who were writing the book had their minds blown, and the people who were reading the book have a similar thing, except without talking to the actual man. It's like, I feel like that's his, you know, that was like his mark on the book in large. It's such a fascinating idea in general.
Sounds like he left a lot of things open-ended then.
Yeah, well, he died of lung cancer before he got to finish the...
He was clearly gunning to write another series of books, and did not. So there's 10 books, there's 2 sets of 5 that go together, and then he wrote a number of short stories that took place after the 10th book that was clearly leading into another conflict, but he never had the chance to write it.
Yeah.
And I think that for all that is a bummer, it doesn't make the game any worse in any way. Right. It just makes it more your responsibility to take care of what else was going to happen. Yeah, I guess I like one thing else. Other thing I was going to mention about just the way this game differs from other games. Like we mentioned, how fleeing is such a popular thing in this game. I thought that like I've played in a number of games using other fantasy systems where I'm thinking mainly of D&D and derivatives and mage style games where it is strongly implied or explicitly stated that that magic may not work the way it's intended to, and I never really get that impression in those sorts of games. Like, I think it's partly because it's either a gotcha that the GM doesn't want to do, where it's like, haha, your spell fails for no reason, or it's because like you just play by the rules enough that you're not trying anything that is gonna get you into trouble.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas in this game, I really feel like there are all these powers in the books, and sorcery especially seems like it would be a very lofty and powerful thing, whereas sorcery is kind of like one of the, like, it's a parlor trick, kind of. It's like a little lesser power.
Yeah, sorcery is expensive and powerful, but super duper limited.
And in general, it's just like, every time you use a spell, you cross your fingers. And every time you use one of your real powers, you have to kind of wonder and marvel that it worked. Just because sometimes you walk through a cave in a tree dome, and all of a sudden none of your powers work, and you're like, "Hi, I still have a sword, right? This probably works. I probably should have swung it around a couple of times in the past few years to make sure I'm still okay with it." And you realize, like, oh, I don't have any
Food.
I'm really hanging on these powers real heavy. Yeah, I've gotten accustomed to just walking through Shadow to some place that had a Denny's so that I could eat, and then I forgot that sometimes you get stuck in a giant tree, and you get poisoned by a shadow snake or something, and, well, none of my spells work, so I guess I'm just going to wait to die. Yeah, I like that feeling.
You do have a propensity for getting poisoned.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's only 3 times.
I'm trying to
Are you
think
counting
of
the thing where we invaded his brains? Was that a poison also?
That was a poison.
Okay.
That was the snake poison. And then there's a dart poison once, and then...
That was no way. That was like the second.
I don't
time.
remember. Yeah, that was like one of my favorite things where I was just like, oh, I'm gonna teleport, and then I'm like, you teleport, and you fall over.
I thought that teleport was interesting. You teleported, stole a horse, and rode back.
Well, I just wanted to get out of the line of fire. That was all I wanted to do, but I didn't know any place nearby, so I was just like, well, let's beam out to this tavern that I know, and then I'll teleport right back. But then I was like, well, I'm completely inebriated on poison now, so I probably should not be zapping myself through the fabric of space.
Poison is a popular one for Amberites because anything exists out there that might or might not work on somebody, so you may as well poison them to see if it works.
And if you just try to walk through Shadow until you find the most deadly poison, that's not careful enough.
I have been poisoned on several occasions and been very grateful for my character's stats.
Once Shadow walked us using the direction that I wanted to try to find a more dangerous place. And all of our horses died of radiation poisoning in the end.
Oh man.
I think I specifically wanted to find a place where no humans could live.
Another aspect of the character creation that I think is different from a lot of games is adding new players, or bringing new players into the game.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I don't know how it works,
Yeah, me
and
neither.
that did happen.
So if a character gets added into the game after the auction is done, or if you specifically want a character to not be there for the auction, they buy all of their stuff in blind, not knowing what other people spent on their points. And they get half ranks between the two that they bought.
Wait,
Even
what
if they
does that mean?
So they are considered between those 2 ranks. So if someone puts like 8 points and there's a 3 and a 10, they might be ranked 4.5.
Is there any mechanical difference between that and full ranks, or is it just so you don't have to tell everyone?
It's suggested that it's not as staggering a difference as a full rank.
Okay.
So because the other thing is, if you buy in blind, it's like raising your stats as well. So when you raise to a stat of another person, you're still considered 0.5 behind them. So if you had a 3 and somebody else had a 10 and you raise your stat to a 10, you didn't actually surpass their rank. You were at their rank in 0.5.
Sure.
And one
you
thing
have to go to the higher rank before you actually pass them.
One thing I was going to ask earlier when we were talking about character creation and advancement, and this is something I'm not 100% on, so I was going to ask you. So when you progress in an attribute, say for instance you have 3 people ranked 1, 2, and 3. If the rank 3 person wants to increase that stat, they can increase it by spending over whatever span of time enough points to equal the person in rank 2, and then they will have the rank below them, like rank 2.5.
Yes.
And if they want to continue to increase it, they may continue to increase it until such time as they've spent enough to be equal to number 1. They will now be number 2, number 1.5. They will be ahead of the person that they had just bought up to.
Right.
But they will still be below whoever's in first.
Right. That's by the book. That's how it's written. I'm being a little bit more flexible than that because that is a very, very rigid system that doesn't really allow for a lot of advancement in most ways. Sure. So I am allowing a little bit more flexibility. But in general, you have to. You don't just put points in. If you say I want to spend points into endurance, for example, what I do is I look at the difference between what your score is and what the next person's endurance is. And if you don't have enough points to reach that difference, you don't spend points.
Sure. I was just observing how unfortunately staggering the warfare auction was, because it kind of amounts to there are a few slightly contentious people in the 0 to 10 range, and then it's up to 75. If you have 75 points, you're still in the game. And it's like, oh no, I can't look there.
So that would be one of the examples that I would say would be a good example for a little bit of wiggle room, where the person who is 3rd rank and at like 10 points with a 60-point gap or something like that, I might let them buy up in chunks of 10 at a time, but probably cost them like 12 points.
Yeah.
So does a new player coming in after it's already been since the auction's already complete, that means that no new player can ever be the 1st rank in a stat because all the 1st ranks are already taken?
Well, theoretically, if a new player says, I want to be the best at strength, I hope nobody has done this, I'm putting 50 in strength, and that is higher than the previous 1st rank, then they would be at 0.5.
Okay.
They would be just a little bit higher.
They would be just a little bit higher no matter what the difference was. So these blind bids coming in are actually a really interesting mechanic, and it's a way to introduce characters that don't have not had any interaction with the main group. And there is a person in the game that I'm running who has done that.
Yep.
So there's one person who came in. He started playing at the same time as the 2nd session, with a few solo sessions to get him up to speed with the rest of the group, and then he's been introduced to the main party, but no one has any idea what he's good at, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's both. It's both an advantage and a disadvantage. I mean, I guess it's not really an advantage for us in any way. I just was going to say I really like that. I like having that mystery there. Yeah. But at the same time, also, he does kind of have a slight advantage in that he's a completely unknown quantity.
Right. Well, I guess his disadvantage, though, is since he wasn't there for the initial auction, he doesn't exactly know what everybody else has been doing for the whole story either, so he can't really gauge anybody else.
Well, our initial auction stats are publicly available.
He did not have access to that.
Yeah. Does he now?
Nope, I have not shared that document with him.
We just sort of assume that we don't know anything about him, and he doesn't know anything about us.
Right.
Yeah.
One other thing I was wondering, and I'm not sure if this is something that we won't know until we are forced to open the red envelope that says "Do not open unless an emergency." If one of our characters should die, is there any contingency in the book for how to reintegrate that player into the game with a new character without disrupting everything?
So, it is generally assumed in a Throne War setting, if you die, you're out of the Throne War, and Sorry.
Yes.
No more playing the game.
That's understandable.
No
Because
more
you know
Thank
too
you for
much.
playing Amber. You are dead.
You know too much, and you can bring too much
Right.
outside information into the game.
One thing that some of the forums have talked about is it's very hard to add a new family member late in the game, a new Amberite, a lot of the time. So one thing you can do is bring them in as a shadow power. So the equivalent of like playing Jazra.
Sure.
Yeah. That
So
makes sense.
you're never going to be as good as the other players, but you can still have a hand and an effect on things going on.
Or you could
On
play
the
like
other
a
hand, Coral
Chaos
was a
champion.
clear addition to the game very late, if you read the books.
yeah.
She did not start at the beginning, but she came out a little bit weaker, but she would be the good example of a person that no one else knows what she's good at.
Yeah.
And whatever her player has decided for her to be doing is probably very interesting. However, she does kind of up and disappear and isn't really there in your face very much.
Right.
I thought, like, that was one of those, like, poor late author not getting to tell you what's going to happen. But I was just like, that didn't really go anywhere, did it?
There's a lot left open there, yeah.
Sure.
I have a feeling even if he would have finished, there would have been a lot left open, but it's still sad.
Probably not that much, though.
That is true. He did seem to like secrets, though.
From a game master perspective, Amber is very challenging.
I believe you.
It's very hard to run an Amber game because there's so much you have to keep track of. I literally have multiple spreadsheets of information that I reference throughout the game to keep track of different stats and different point totals and what everybody's objectives. I've had to make spreadsheets of different NPCs' objectives just to keep things straight. Because
Here's a flowchart.
basically I've had to make flowcharts for different NPCs because they're all doing things constantly also.
Yeah, when our characters took an inadvertent 3-month break.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. I guess that's one of those things, like, I feel like it would be cool if we kept a spreadsheet of what we thought NPCs were up to, but at the same time, since at any time our loyalties to one another might be unsteady, it would be very difficult for us to do such a thing in a way that that wasn't unnecessarily revelatory. If we wanted to, like, update the spreadsheet, we'd be like, nope, I'm not going to tell them that.
So some of you have given me updates on what you think about other players that have been very, very interesting and amusing, and I really wish that would continue and go on more. That it would be fun to keep a spreadsheet shared with me, for example, of what you think everybody's up to.
I feel like my journal goes into a lot of that sort of stuff, and I feel like at the same time, like, I know Rory had mentioned, oh, well, you know, his original plan had been to make all the journals public, and I'm like, I don't want to make my journal
The journals
public.
will go public at some point. That was part of the. I made that very clear from up front, that the journals would be shared at some point. We just got to a point where I called it was the end of book 1. I still think the journals need to stay private because I think there's too many secrets in the
A
journals.
lot of secrets.
I feel kind of bad because I have not been journaling very well because I am contributing the session write-ups, and I feel like it would just be like doing 2 session write-ups in a row, and I would freak out and pull my hair out.
Well, remember, the journal is often from your character's perspective, so many of you who write journals do not actually list the events that have occurred in any substantial way. Which is fine, it's just talking about your interpretations or what you'd actually write in that journal, which actually in some ways is better.
Yeah, my character spends a lot of his journal time bitching about things.
I'm probably going to try to start journaling a little more, but it's just sort of like, I could just say, like, I was poisoned today. I really hate that. That stinks. But that's not really consistent, I don't think.
One of the things is that like, I never feel like I have to talk about my character's injuries because even in my backstory, my character was injured because he's reckless a lot. And it's like, it's fairly commonplace for him to just wander back someplace and be like, well, I got stabbed again. Guess I need to work on that.
I lost my pinky today. This is a first.
I was saying before that I'm not 100% sure that's the first finger my character's lost.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's heard stories, so even if it was the first finger he'd lost, he's pretty confident he can grow it back. Give it some time. I'm pretty sure the Corwin story is probably the stuff of legend.
Yeah, well,
Growing back his own eyes.
Yeah, do we ever know if Benedict grew back his arm?
I did mention to someone that Benedict was seen with 2 arms.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure I went to
I don't
see
think
him.
I've ever
So that
seen him.
probably was me. I went to see him at one point before it became apparent that those of the elders who were not indisposed due to some sort of peril were indisposed due to disinterest.
That's what he always was in the books, though.
Yeah, he's like, thank you for turning to me. Don't let it happen again.
I always feel like he'd be there to like if you had fallen down at his feet, he would put out his hand to help you, but at the same time, he would clap you on the back really hard to let you know that this is not going to happen all the time.
And that is one thing that this is a question that I have, and I don't want anyone to answer it, because if I don't know it in character, then I ought to know it. But there's the question of parentage is another thing in character creation, like which of the elders or other Amber-ish people is your mother or father, and I feel like, to the best of my knowledge, well, to the best of my character's knowledge, nobody, like, at least 2 or 3 of the other players do not know, or wouldn't tell you. Even if they were asked point blank, they would say that they didn't know.
Is that supposed to be as common as it was in this? Do you know?
It's up in the air.
Sure.
Some people know who their parents are and aren't sharing it, for example.
I guess my thing was kind of, I specifically said that I didn't want to know in character at the outset. Not to tip my hand. And it's one of those things like, I feel like if I hadn't said that, it probably would have just been simpler for me to know and just not decide. And granted, it's not necessarily a player choice, but the players can make a suggestion. Like,
I feel like if the throne ever becomes contentious in that game, that characters are going to be sprinting around Shadow trying to figure out who their parents are.
Well, I'm the one with everyone's blood, so I think I got an advantage on that front.
I was going to say, where did you get my blood? But then I was like, oh, you put me in all of your machines. I think I was probably in a active tank or something.
I've been hooked up to Jeff's machines 2 times in one session.
I mean, he's probably got more of your blood than you have.
Can somebody explain to me what Jeff's machines means?
Jeff's character is from a I don't know, shadow planet, whatever, that exists in a stage of advanced technology, whereas the rest of us are more or less from Amber technology, which is like, medieval.
Right,
and,
fantasy setting.
And Jeff is like from the future. He's got like plugs in the back of his neck that hook up to machines and shit.
So he's got all kinds of computers and all kinds of medical technology, and he seems to have a fairly authoritative position there, where he can tell people, these people need to get medical attention right now. And he can also tell them, take their blood, take a little bit of their blood so that I have it.
Just in case.
Jeff has done that. Jeff has taken my blood, I'm pretty sure. He took my blood fairly rapidly, and he has probably had the opportunity to, as Ed mentioned, have more of my blood than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the wounds you suffered and then been taken straight there. It's just like he probably couldn't have avoided getting a lot of blood from you.
Yeah, if it wasn't said, the characters are obviously superhuman in this game.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
If you're not intimately familiar with it, it's like, it's not the same as playing like gods, and it's not the same as playing Superman, but the characters are basically like the pinnacle of what a human could possibly achieve in any given area. And so it's like, and depending on the shadow, some shadows are different, treat people differently. So basically you're very strong, you're very fast, you're very good with weapons, you're very smart. Unless you're not.
And then your rank can actually increase it above that. So that if you're like first rank in warfare, your ability to fight is almost supernatural. They describe at one point, Benedict again, basically being able to predict where a good ambush would be and block the person who's invisible without actually knowing that they're there.
And I guess a good way to say it would be like the base, and granted, you can go below the base in one of your attributes if you want to. The base is like the peak of human potential, and there is no upper limit.
Right.
Except for what the rank prescribes and what your GM will allow.
Like the protagonist of the first series grows back both of his eyeballs after they were burned out with a hot poker. It took him 2 years.
It's unspecified, somewhere around there.
His brother Gerard, who's the undisputed champion of strength, once wrestles him into unconsciousness and then holds him suspended over a cliff for an undisclosed amount of time until he wakes up from being bludgeoned unconscious.
And to put into perspective, Corwin and his brother Random lifted a car with their bare hands and moved it something like 20 feet.
And they're not
without being too stressed out about it.
Yeah, and they weren't too worried about it.
Corwin picks up a piece of furniture and throws it across the room in a fight.
I was going to say
the furniture breaks when it hits somebody. They are orders of magnitude better. Like the actual Amberites are orders of magnitude better than regular people are.
Corwin survives Black Death.
But
yes, that is true.
You can buy down one of your attributes to
or more.
Human level. Well, yes, you could buy all 4 of them down to human level if you
wanted advanced
really shitty at a lot of
I was going to say, if you had a plan, if you had a real good plan for what you were going to do with your character, and you were confident that it would work, you would still die almost right away.
That would be a character concept that I would question as a GM, and really want to talk a person out of unless they had a very good plan for it.
As a player, I could hardly imagine a situation where I'd want to buy a stat down to human.
No, I have a 0, and
there's 2 things. There's 2 steps of buying down. So if you don't bid on a stat, you can buy it down to chaos level. Chaos level is still your Olympian for quality. You're not necessarily the world's best, but you're still good.
It's still
human level, which puts you down to you're pretty much average for an Earth human, and that's terrible. That is a significant weakness. If you find out somebody else has a human level stat, you can win against them in that stat every single time, pretty much no matter what is planned.
It gains you what 25 points to buy down to human, and so it's basically like saying anybody who spent 0 points is about 25 points better than you.
Yes.
It's just like,
but
it's just a free-for-all.
Remember that Shadow Earth is not one of the more powerful shadows for individuals in it.
Sure.
So also, if you buy yourself down to human level, you have difficulty with things in Shadow.
Sure.
For example, if you don't have at least Chaos level endurance, you cannot walk these patterns.
It's just too hard.
It is too hard. You will die from the time you walk the pattern.
And you'll get burned.
Yep, and then you'll fall over and be incinerated.
Yeah, it's it's a
the stats are as much as they are super variable, and they seem really really like ethereal and fluid and that sort of thing. They're pretty cut and dry in a lot of situations, I feel. And it is nice that Rory keeps track of that and not me.
I think going back to one of the first things I said in this episode about how I don't think I would trust this system to play a lot of different types of games. I think the core of that is that for the diceless system to really groove, in my opinion, you have to start from a baseline of if the player endeavors to do something, they will succeed unless a numerically superior force opposes it. And I think that's basically what Amber level is if an Amberite tries to do something, they will succeed unless there is a metaphysical reason coming out of Shadow or from someplace else that says that they shouldn't.
Yeah. they're very capable. Like,
Yes.
even in games where you play capable people, like Fate claims, oh, you're playing everybody is playing capable and dynamic and adventurous characters, and in D&D, you play people like godlike powers and get bitten by dragons and shit. But like in Amber, like you said, you start with people being able to accomplish what they set their mind to, unless there's something in their way. Like that's.
I mean, like if
cool.
I was gonna put Amber into Fate, I think baseline that I might just go out is Amber level is 4.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then each rank is +1 from there.
So
if you were first rank and there were 5 players, you'd have 9.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my initial thoughts on how I'd kind of compare those two of levels of success.
Yeah.
I think like a game where the player characters are playing like gods or something, or archmages, if you want to take mage as an example. I think that this would be a fairly apt way of of getting around the fact that the archmage stuff in the Mage the Awakening game is a little bit off the chains in terms of how many dice you have to roll to do whatever the hell it is you want. I think that this might be a way to achieve that, but generally speaking, like, I think that Amber hits just the right notes where it's like you're playing characters who are like superhuman and super capable and super powerful, but yet the universe that the game is set in still puts them into normal people positions where you have to walk to places, you have to thrust a sword to defeat your enemies, and you can't just like soar through the cosmos and shoot laser beams at everyone.
I would like to sign up for the Cosmos later laser beams.
Well,
I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm just saying, like.
Also, I honestly feel like we could like with as detailed as this sort of thing could be, we could do a podcast entirely about Amber and probably run it for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
I think that if podcasts had existed when the game first came out, it would have been done a lot of times already.
There were a lot of play-by-forum Amber games in the early days that were really, really well documented and are actually very interesting to read through.
You can find a lot of material about Amber. Like, I've looked at various places on the internet just to like find. I mean, not for nothing, you can find like lists of the powers that exist. But like, if you Google like Amber diceless role-playing game powers, you will get a list of powers, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 it will have powers that were house ruled for that game.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly like sub powers, if you want to take a pattern or Logris mastery in installments, or different variants of broken pattern, that sort of stuff. It crops up almost every time you find descriptions of stuff.
So the other thing that Amber does really well is it allows you to invent new powers and modify powers on the fly. Like, your character can say, oh, I like how this aspect of Trump works. I want to make it better and make a new power based off of that. So then you get kind of a sub-Trump power. It's part, and the points in it, and you have a unique ability that no one else can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sort of built in, and it's like, that's, looking at that stuff, and especially after reading the books, you can see all of this wiggle room where you could come up with a million cool characters, and it's like the Amber novels are like my go-to books to read when I want inspiration for like the way characters act or interact with each other. It's like, and then also you have practically this infinity where you could come up with new characters and stuff, and it's like every time I read them, I'm cooking ideas the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
It's such an excellent series for that, and I feel like the diceless role-playing game gets a lot of that very right.
The biggest issue I have with it is that, like, when we fall off of the horse for a little while, I get it'll fade from my consciousness, but like after I play it, I'm just like, it's all I'm like thinking about for a while. I'm still like wondering, like, oh, maybe if I try to do this, Rory will let me make this thing happen with my character. I'm wondering if this is true, or if this is the case. Ugh, we're in a sticky situation now. I don't know. It's I'm still riding that wave right now, which is why I'm glad we're doing this recording.
And
Yeah, we ran this game last week. I would recommend watching it. The last session was death defying,
yeah,
at least for me.
one thing I wanted to, I guess, mention, we should probably wrap up here pretty quick, is that we'll probably do a follow-up episode about Amber at some point as the game progresses. But also on Twitch TV, we're House Rule Gaming, and there are we didn't get them all. I missed a couple of them, but there are a lot of episodes of this game up. The latest one, which was I'm trying to remember the
Friday?
episode. But yeah, it was just
I don't remember.
this last Friday. Was a really good example of some sort of hardcore conflict, and walking through Shadow, and like a lot of really cool stuff happened in that session.
Yeah.
But a lot
Yeah.
of the session recordings are pretty neat.
Also, for those who are interested in the game and the books but have not read the books, watching the games might spoil some things because we talk about things that happen throughout the entirety of the series.
Yes.
So I would recommend. I mean, I've recommended anyway. Like everybody who is remotely interested in fantasy should read Amber. But you know,
If you can read, you should read these books.
and if you
Sure.
if
And
all you
the
can do
first
is
book is
listen,
only about 110 pages long, so it's a good intro for a short novel.
yeah. And if all you can do is listen, I believe 9 out of 10 of the books are narrated by Roger Zelazny himself.
There are unabridged ones by Roger Zelazny. They're very difficult to find. There are also new recorded unabridged ones by Alejandro and Will Wheaton. Is that right? Anyway,
That'd be
I-
awesome. I'd
heard
listen
of
to
it,
that.
anyway, I might be wrong on that, but I'll put it in the show notes. But you can check those out. I think you can get those through Audible.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'd recommend them for basically anybody. I want to listen to the unabridged Zelazny ones now.
Yeah.
Because all I had was the abridged ones, and I was really sad
I'm
to think they were
listening to
left
an
out.
audiobook right now, and I'm getting bored with it. And I'm just like, ooh, maybe I'll just go through all of the Amber books again and just get it all on me. Get that stank all over my body.
But yeah. So if you have any questions, we can answer those and also forward those to
Absolutely.
Rory if you have questions about Amber.
Nothing I want to
I'm
do
willing to
more
bug
right now
him
than talk
for you.
to anybody and everybody about Amber.
So yeah, you can send us an email, houserulepodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet us at houserule. And yeah, so thanks for listening, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.